The deep void beyond the Ruvak Empire's borders was not empty. It was a place the galaxy itself had learned to fear, a stretch of lightless space so vast and silent that even the bravest explorers would not set foot inside. They called it the Forbidden Zone, not out of superstition, but because every civilization that had dared to map it had met the same fate. Their ships never came back. Their signals never reached the stars again. Their names faded from records as if the universe itself had decided they were no longer part of history. For centuries, the Forbidden Zone had been left alone. The Galactic Council had marked its edges with automated sentinels, huge black machines, the size of cities, spinning slowly in the dark. They did not attack intruders. They did something worse. They let them in. And then, without fail, the zone swallowed them whole. No survivors, no wreckage, not even drifting debris. It was as though the ships had never existed in the first place. Captain Valrek of the Ruvak, patrol cruiser Eris Talon, knew all of this. Every cadet in the fleet was taught the same warning: stay away from the zone. Never cross the threshold. If you see its borders on your sensors, turn away. The Eris Talon had been on a standard border sweep, scanning for smugglers and pirate activity in the outer sectors. Nothing unusual, nothing dangerous until the ship's sensor AI spoke three words that froze every heart on the bridge. Signal detected. Inside. The bridge went silent. Valrek's second officer, a younger Ruvak with pale scales, looked up from his console, his face drained of color. Inside the zone? The AI's calm, neutral voice confirmed it. Unregistered energy source. Coordinates. Relayed. Object is moving at sublight velocity. That was impossible. No one moved inside the zone. There were no ships there to move. No life, no machines, no energy at least. That was what they'd been told. Valrek stepped toward the main display, his tall, angular frame tense. He stared at the faint, flickering trace on the screen. It was weak, barely holding together, but the computer kept insisting it was real. Enhance, he ordered. The image sharpened, and the room seemed to grow colder. The shape was not like any Ruvak vessel, nor any council class ship. It had sharp angles, a narrow bow, and a long hull bristling with antennae. And across its side, half buried in shadow, were markings. Letters Valrek's breath caught. He didn't read the human language fluently, but he knew those letters. Every officer in the galaxy did. They spelled out the name of a world far from here. Earth. The bridge crew exchanged uneasy glances. The humans were explorers, yes, but they were also careful. They had never sent ships into the Forbidden Zone. Their fleet records were public, and nothing about this vessel appeared on them. Valrek turned to his second officer. Cross-reference hull configuration with known human registry. The officer hesitated, then his hands moved quickly across the console. Seconds later, the results appeared. And even the ship's environmental controls could not hide the sudden chill that swept through the air. Match found. The officer whispered. Designation: Orion's Wake. Missing. 42 years. Valrek's tail flicked nervously. 42 years ago, the Orion's Wake had vanished near the fringe worlds. No distress call, no debris, no answers. It had simply been erased from the galaxy. Put it through to the recorder, Valrek said sharply. We'll take the evidence straight to the council, the AI chimed. Warning, signal degrading. Valrek's head snapped toward the display. The image was breaking apart, dissolving into static. The hull markings blurred, the silhouette faded. The trace was slipping away, a just gain. Track it, he barked, but it was already too late. Signal vanished, leaving the sensors blind. The space inside the zone was silent once more. On the bridge, no one spoke. Every officer knew what had just happened. Zone had shown them something, and then it had taken it away. Valrek stood still for a long time, his mind racing. The sensible thing would be to turn around, file the report, and let the council decide. But as he stared into that dark stretch of space, he felt a strange pull. The humans had a reputation among the stars of stubbornness, a refusal to give up once they had set their minds on something. And now, Here was proof that one of their own ships had been inside the zone for over 4 decades. It was the kind of mystery that could destroy a career, or make one legendary. By the time the Aris Talon docked at the Ruvac capital, the rumors had already spread. Someone in the crew had spoken. Whispers flew between intelligence officers and diplomats. The Galactic Council's meeting chamber was flooded with speculation. When Valrek presented his findings, the reaction was immediate and cold. The council speaker, a tall insectoid from the Lore Confederacy, listened in silence as the recording played. When it was finished, the speaker leaned forward, his voice quiet but sharp. "Captain, you are mistaken. There is no human ship in the Forbidden Zone. There never was." Valrek's eyes narrowed. "With respect, the evidence is right here." "Evidence?" The speaker interrupted. "That is clearly the result of a sensor malfunction. Perhaps a ghost signal. Perhaps a trick of cosmic radiation. You will strike this from your report." The chamber erupted in quiet murmurs. Valrek stared at the speaker, feeling a surge of anger. "And if I refuse?" "Then you will be relieved of duty," the speaker replied, "and your ship reassigned. This matter is closed." But as Valrek left the chamber, he saw something. In the eyes of a few council members, not dismissal, not doubt, fear. That night, far from the council's surveillance, Valrek received a secure transmission on his personal communicator. The message contained no name, no origin point only, a human voice speaking in a low, urgent tone. "We know what you saw," the voice said. "Meet us at coordinates attached. Come alone. If you want the truth, you'll find it there." Coordinates were just outside the zone. Valrek sat in silence after the message ended, his claws tapping slowly against the table. The council wanted this buried. The humans wanted it found. And somewhere in the darkness between them, a ship that should not exist was waiting. The pull toward the zone grew stronger. The image of those faded Earth letters would not leave his mind, and in his gut, Valrek knew that if he turned away now, the truth would vanish just like the signal. The Aris Talon would sail again. Into the darkness, into the Forbidden Zone. The Alien Council chamber was still buzzing from the first confirmed sighting of the strange vessel. Reports from their border patrol were coming in, but each one was more confusing than the last. Some claimed the ship shimmered like it was not fully there, as if parts of it existed in another place. Others swore its surface was covered in symbols that no known translation system could read. The commander of the forward observation post had sent a single brief message before all contact. Was lost for words that chilled even the oldest council members. It looked back at us. That single line carried an unspoken horror, for in all their centuries of exploration, they had been the ones watching others, never the other way around. The fact that this human ship, if it was human at all, had noticed their observation from such a distance was beyond their understanding of known sensor technology. The counselors exchanged nervous glances, one silently questioning whether they had stumbled into something that was never meant to be found. While debates raged, in the council, far away in the shadowed depths of the Forbidden Zone, the ship itself moved with a terrifying calm. It was not rushing. It was not trying to hide. Instead, it traveled as though it had every right to be there, its path straight and deliberate. Lo. The alien listening posts along the perimeter tried again and again to hail it, sending messages in. Over 30 different languages, not once did the vessel respond. But the strangest part wasn't its silence, it was what happened to the stations that tried to scan it. Every time a sensor beam touched the human ship, the equipment failed within seconds. Screens went black, data feeds corrupted, power grids shorted out. By the time repair crews got the systems back online, the ship was already far past their position, leaving nothing but dead silence behind. It was as though the vessel itself was erasing its trail, removing any proof it had been there. Inside the military command center of the alien fleet, Admiral Rezik sat in his command chair, studying the incomplete images and corrupted files his scouts had managed to bring back. None of them showed a full picture of the ship. Parts of it were always missing. Sometimes the bow was there, but not the stern. Sometimes only a silhouette with a strange glowing edge remained. It made no sense, and that was what disturbed him the most. Rezek had faced countless unknowns before, but this one felt different. There was no randomness here. No sign of error or clumsy technology. Everything about the human ship felt intentional. Its silence, its strange interference, even the way it allowed partial glimpses before disappearing into static hit was all a message. But a message in a language no alien had learned to read. He tightened his grip on the console. If this vessel belonged to the humans, then the galaxy had badly underestimated them. Back on the ship. In its dark and quiet interior, a single figure stood at the viewport. Captain Alina Ward did not smile, but her eyes were fixed on the faint, distant glimmers of alien patrol craft shadowing her path. She knew they were there, even without the ship's instruments confirming it. They had been tracking her since. She crossed the edge of the zone. She had expected this. In fact, she had counted on it. "They're curious," she said quietly to her first officer, who stood just behind her. "That's good. Curiosity means they're afraid to act without knowing what they're dealing with." Her voice was calm, but there was an edge of steel beneath it. Ward was not in the forbidden zone by accident. She was here for a reason, one that even her crew did not fully understand yet. And if the aliens thought they were hunting her, she intended to make sure they realized, far too late, that it was the other way around. Hours passed, and the tension along the zone's outer defenses grew unbearable. Patrol commanders were receiving conflicting orders: observe the human ship, don't engage, but also prepare for possible confrontation. The alien navy was used to showing its strength, overwhelming any intruder with speed and force. But here, hesitation had crept in. No one wanted to be the first to provoke a response from something they didn't understand. The ship's slow approach felt like a tested, dangerous game to see who would break first. Even worse, the forbidden. The zone itself had a dark reputation, one that every young officer heard as a warning during training. Ships that entered too deep into its territory rarely returned. Now, a human vessel was traveling deeper than any alien ship had dared in generations. And instead of being torn apart, it moved untouched, as if the zone itself recognized and accepted it. Then came the moment no one could explain. The human ship stopped. Not slowed, stopped entirely in the black emptiness, as though anchored to something invisible. From every alien sensor that still worked, it appeared dead in space. No heat signatures, no engine output, nothing. What? When the patrol fleet cautiously edged closer, their comm systems lit up with a burst of static that somehow formed a sound three. Low, deep tones, repeated twice. It wasn't language, but it wasn't random noise either. Every crew member who heard it felt the same thing. They were being acknowledged. Before the alien ships could react, the human vessel's lights flared. To life in a pattern no one recognized, and then without any visible motion, it was simply gone. One moment it was there, the next there was only empty space. Sensors searched desperately, scanning every direction, but the readings were clean. The human ship had vanished as though it had never existed. In the council chamber, panic was barely contained. If the ship could enter their most guarded region, disrupt their systems, send some kind of unknown signal, and then vanish at will, then they were dealing with a power far beyond anything they had prepared for. Some counselors demanded immediate war. Others called for a complete lockdown of all borders. And a few whispered the most frightening possibility of all, that maybe the forbidden zone was not theirs to control. In the middle of the shouting, a young intelligence officer entered with new data. His voice shook as he delivered it. "We found something." Deep in the audio file of the ship's signal, he hesitated before speaking the final words. "It's a date. And it's our date. Exactly 1 year from today." The chamber fell silent. If the humans were marking time, then they were coming back, and next time. No one could predict what they would bring with them. For the next several days, the Alien Council worked in complete secrecy. The date found in the human signal had shaken them more than any military defeat could. A year, just 1 year, was barely enough time to prepare for something they didn't understand. The public was told nothing. Official news channels spoke of minor border incidents. Nothing serious, nothing worth worry. But behind the closed doors of military headquarters, the atmosphere was suffocating. Entire fleets were being reassigned, hidden weapons brought out. From vaults, research labs forced into around-the-clock work. They didn't even know if the humans meant to attack. But the fact that they had given a date meant one thing: they controlled the clock. It would happen when they decided. And the alien empires had no power to change that. Admiral Rezek was among the few who dared to voice the question. None wanted to hear. What if this wasn't a threat at all? What if the humans weren't warning them, but simply telling them when something else, something worse, was going to happen? His words unsettled even his most loyal officers. The galaxy had always assumed humans were dangerous, unpredictable, and sometimes reckless. But this level of precision, this calculated silence, suggested something far more: chilling discipline. The kind of discipline you only saw in forces that had faced wars beyond imagination and survived them. If the date meant the humans were preparing for something, then maybe the aliens were just caught in the middle of a much larger storm, far away, deep in the cold black. Captain Alina Ward's ship was no longer in the Forbidden Zone, or rather it wasn't in any space the alien charts recognized. Her crew moved through their duties with quiet focus, their trust in her absolute, even though she had not told them everything. The ship's strange vanishings, its ability to cut through the zone without harm. The signals sent to the alien patrols, all of it was part of a plan she had been entrusted with months before. Ward's orders were sealed under the highest classification Earth had, stamped with the mark of the Fleet Council itself. Even she had needed 3 separate security verifications. Before opening them, the orders had been simple but terrifying. Enter the zone. Make them see you. Leave them waiting back in alien territory. Small incidents began to spread whispers of human presence far from their borders. A freighter claimed to have picked up a strange reading before its navigation failed. A mining outpost swore that 3 of its workers saw a massive shadow pass over the asteroid field, blotting out stars, only for nothing to appear on sensors. Each report was dismissed officially, but within the military, they were logged and compared. A pattern was forming, and it wasn't random. Someone or something was mapping their territory, one silent pass at a time. And every incident happened at precise intervals, like pieces of a clock ticking toward an inevitable moment. The more they studied it, the more dread settled into the alien leadership. The humans weren't testing them, they were measuring them. Every time they appeared, every time they disrupted a system, every time they left without trace, it all seemed designed to see how quickly the aliens could respond, how they deployed, how they communicated under pressure. It wasn't intimidation. It was reconnaissance. And that meant one terrible thing. The humans were learning how to fight them before the fight even began. In the hidden war rooms of the alien empire, arguments turned vicious. Some demanded they strike first, to show strength and break the human plan. But others knew that to act without understanding would be to walk into a trap. And there was something else. Every attempt to track human ships beyond a certain point had failed. Their trail just ended. No wreckage, no debris, no faint engine signatures. It was as though the ships simply stepped out of reality itself. A technology like that could break the balance of the entire galaxy, if it wasn't already broken. Meanwhile, on Earth, preparations were being made too, though in a very different way. The human fleets were not massing in the open or testing new weapons in obvious displays. Instead, small strike groups disappeared quietly from known bases, their records erased. Ships underwent silent modifications, adding systems that didn't appear on any official registry. Even the crews didn't fully understand the changes. They just knew their ships no longer behaved like before. Faster jumps, stronger shielding, sensor arrays that seemed to read a battle before it even began. Earth was not just preparing for the aliens, they were preparing for something beyond them. As the weeks passed, the alien leaders began to notice something even stranger. The humans had stopped showing themselves entirely. No sightings, no sensor glitches, no sudden vanishings. The space around the Forbidden Zone was quiet, too quiet. To the inexperienced, it was a relief. But to those who had studied human behavior, It was a warning. Humans did not simply vanish, unless they wanted you to think they had. That meant somewhere out in the dark. They were working on something that no one would see coming until it was too late. One night, in the capital of the alien empire, Admiral Rezek stood alone in the grand observation hall, looking out over the endless stars. He thought of the date. Less than a year now. The galaxy believed it had power, fleets, armies, and alliances that could withstand anything. But for the first time in his career, he wasn't sure, because he had seen the human captain's eyes. In the brief, fragmented footage they'd recovered from the patrol ships, she wasn't reckless. She wasn't desperate. She looked like someone who already knew the end of the story and was simply waiting for the rest of them to catch up. The Alien Council could not take the silence any longer. For weeks, they'd seen nothing, no mysterious blips on their sensors, no sudden flickers in deep space, no shadows slipping past their fleets. And that made them more uneasy than any direct threat. It felt as if the humans had simply stepped back to watch. The generals wanted action, the politicians wanted answers, and the public, though still unaware of the full danger, was beginning to notice that too many warships were missing from their usual patrols. So, the council made a decision. They would not wait for the humans to make the next move. They would set a trap, something so large, so perfectly planned that no ship, no matter how advanced, could escape without revealing itself. The plan was simple on paper. A deep space convoy carrying critical resources would pass near the Forbidden Zone. In reality, the convoy was its cargo holds empty, its escort fleet loaded with tracking devices and sensor arrays tuned to detect even the faintest distortion in space-time. Hundreds of ships, arranged in a loose formation, their patrol routes overlapping so no gap existed. If a human vessel tried to get close, it would be caught in a web of overlapping sensor grids. The council believed it was foolproof. After all, humans had only ever been sighted when they chose to be. This time, the aliens would force them into view. For the first 3 days of the operation, nothing happened. The convoy drifted through the blackness, the escort ships holding position with precision, their crews tense and ready. Messages went back and forth between captains' updates, small jokes to cut the tension, predictions about when the ghost ship might appear. By the 4th day, a sense of overconfidence began to creep in. Maybe the humans had seen through the trap. Maybe they weren't coming. Some officers even started to believe the sightings had been exaggerated from the start. But then, the readings began. At first, it was just a whisper on the sensors, too faint to be a ship, too strange to be debris. It moved in patterns that didn't make sense, blinking in and out of detection like a heartbeat. The escorts shifted formation, tightening the grid. The readings vanished. Then, minutes later, they reappeared on the opposite side of the formation. This time, the movement was faster, almost playful. The alien captains sent coded orders to each other, trying to predict the next appearance, but the signals were interrupted. Not jammed, just missing, as if the space between ships had briefly stopped existing. Then it happened. The human ship appeared not far away, not at the edge of their grid, but inside it, directly beside the lead convoy vessel. One moment there was empty space. The next, a massive dark shape blocked the stars. It didn't glow, didn't hum, didn't emit the faint vibrations most ships gave off. It was simply there, silent and absolute. Every weapon in range locked onto it. Targeting systems screamed with alerts. Power cores surged, crews shouted for clearance to fire. But before the first shot could be given, the human ship moved. No, moved was the wrong word. It seemed to step out of the universe entirely, vanishing so completely that even the targeting locks went blind. A second later it appeared again, this time inside the formation of escort ships, weaving between them like a predator moving through a herd. The aliens tried to box it in, but every attempt failed. The ship seemed to anticipate their moves before they made them. Sensor crews were shouting that it wasn't traveling at any measurable speed. It was simply appearing and disappearing in impossible ways, and then as suddenly as it had come, the ship stopped. It hovered dead center in the middle of the escort fleet, its massive black hull absorbing every drop of light around it. A section of its side opened not like a hatch, more like the ship itself had parted on something emerged. Small pod, no bigger than a lifeboat, drifted out, unpowered. The aliens didn't fire. They were too busy trying to understand what they were seeing. The pod floated for a few seconds. Then a short burst of light flashed from it, a coded signal. It repeated only once. Every translator in the fleet worked at the message, but the result was the same across all systems. 2 words. Too slow. Before anyone could react, the human ship and the pod both vanished. No jump signature, no warp distortion, no energy spike. Just gone. The convoy remained unharmed. But the trap was destroyed, not in battle, but in the far more dangerous realm of morale. Because every captain, every crew member, and every admiral who saw that message understood it wasn't just a taunt. It was a measurement. The humans had come into their most secure, most prepared, most well-guarded operation, and left without a scratch. Now the aliens knew they were being timed. Back in the capital, Admiral Rezek listened to the reports with a heavy expression. This wasn't an enemy showing off for pride. This was training. Humans were counting their moves, measuring their reaction times, testing their limits. And if the date was real, then the trap had not been the end of anything. It had just been the beginning of the clock ticking faster. The council chambers were not designed for fear. They were vast, polished halls filled with cold light and perfect symmetry, meant to project order and control. But now, every movement inside them felt tense. Every voice carried a trace of unease. The footage from the failed trap had been replayed over and over, each frame analyzed until the images began to lose meaning. Yet the meaning was already clear for comfort. The human ship hadn't just escaped, it had played with them. It had moved through their fleets like it knew every thought in their captains' minds. And then it had left them a message that could not be ignored. Too slow. Some admirals argued for a full-scale search, mobilizing every fleet to sweep the outer systems. Others demanded stronger borders, reinforced patrols, and heavier weapons. But a smaller group, scientists, analysts, and intelligence officers, had a different, far more unsettling theory. They believed the humans weren't preparing for war against the Council at all. The tests, the speed trials, the strange movements, they might not have been challenges. They might have been rehearsals, for an attack, but for something coming. Through alien space, something the humans knew about, but the Council did not. The idea spread quietly at first, whispered in back rooms and secured channels. But the more they examined the humans' actions, the harder it became to dismiss. Why else would the humans risk revealing themselves? Why would they leave a warning instead of a threat? And why had their ship been sighted so often near the Forbidden Zone, a region no one entered because even the oldest charts marked it as unstable and dangerous? Admiral Rezek, who had spent decades studying patterns of war, began to see something he didn't like. The humans weren't prowling, they were mapping. They were measuring the galaxy's response time, how quickly fleets could mobilize, how fast borders could close, how well ships could coordinate under pressure. But to what end? The question hung in every meeting unanswered, and no one could prove the theory, but it clung to every conversation like a shadow. A few brave officials suggested direct communication with humanity, but that idea died quickly. The Council had no secure channel to reach them, no guarantee a message would even be received, and no desire to reveal how unsettled they were. So they chose the worst possible path. They did nothing, not because they weren't concerned, but because they didn't know which move was safe. And in the silence, fear began to grow in the ranks, out on the edges of Council space. Patrol crews were reporting strange things, faint energy echoes that didn't match any known signature, flashes of movement far beyond sensor range, and even stories of shadows moving against the stars. Some of these could be explained by sensor glitches or deep space phenomena, but others came from trusted captains with decades of service. Men and women not given to panic or fantasy. More disturbingly, some of the sightings didn't match human technology at all. They were bigger, faster, and according to the most chilling report, completely silent, even when passing within visual range. When that last report reached Admiral Rezek, he didn't file it away as a routine anomaly. He didn't laugh it off as a nervous patrol crew's imagination. He locked himself in his private office and stared at the star map. If the humans had been testing them, then perhaps these other sightings were the real threat in humanity's. Strange maneuvers were not meant to intimidate, but to prepare. The thought twisted his stomach. If that was true, then the council wasn't facing an enemy. It was standing in the middle of someone else's battlefield. And it didn't even know when the battle would start. 3 days later, the fear turned to panic. A listening post at the very edge of the forbidden zone went completely dark. No distress signal, no debris field, no sign of destruction. It simply vanished. When a scout ship was sent to investigate, its last transmission was 3 words before its signal was swallowed by static. It's already here. It's in the council chambers. A new kind of silence took hold, the kind that comes when you realize the enemy you've been watching was never the real danger at all. The message from the scout ship had echoed through every comm channel on the council's network. It played until the words became like an old wound raw and aching. It's already here. No one knew what it was. The analysts tried to compare the static pattern to known interference types, searching for a technical explanation, but nothing matched. Military strategists demanded reconnaissance fleets, but the commanders hesitated, unwilling to risk more ships to an unknown force that could erase a listening post without leaving even dust behind. For the first time in generations, the council found itself frozen. It had been built to rule, to govern, to command. But now, it had to admit an uncomfortable truth, did not understand what was coming. While the council argued in their polished halls, the outer systems whispered in fear. Trade ships began changing routes to avoid the forbidden zone entirely, even if it meant losing weeks of travel time. Civilian stations tightened curfews, and local militias quietly upgraded their old weapons, pretending it was for training purposes. On the shadowed edges of space, rumors bloomed faster than the truth could keep up. Some claimed that it was a new council weapon gone wrong. Others swore it was the humans themselves, moving with such speed and stealth that they appeared supernatural. But in the deepest and most guarded corners of those rumors, another idea began to take root. Something had woken up in the forbidden zone, something older than the council, older than the humans, and it was moving outward. And then the humans returned. Not with a fleet, not with a show of force, just one ship. The same ship. The same black, sharp-edged vessel that had danced through the council's trap months earlier. It appeared at the exact coordinates where the listening post had vanished, sliding out of warp with a precision that felt less like navigation and more like instinct. For nearly 20 minutes, the ship held position, scanning the void. Then it moved slowly, deliberately toward the darkness that had swallowed the scout. It was almost as if it was walking into the jaws of something only it could see. The council scrambled to respond. Warships were dispatched, orders barked to intercept and demand answers. But before any could reach the humans, an encrypted transmission arrived on a council channel no one had ever given them. The voice that spoke was calm, steady, almost bored, but beneath it ran a thread of something dangerous. "You are watching the wrong enemy," the human voice said. "We've been trying to keep it contained. But containment is ending. If you value your worlds, stand down and do not interfere." And then the signal cut. Panic rippled through the council chambers. Some called it a bluff, a human ploy to claim the forbidden zone for themselves. Others believed it was a trap to lure council fleets into ambush. But Admiral Rezek, sitting in the shadowed corner of the chamber, didn't speak. He recognized something in the human's tone, not arrogance. Not threat, but a kind of grim urgency. He had heard it before, in the voices of soldiers who knew they were facing something they might not survive. 2 hours later, long-range probes tracking the human ship caught sight of something moving in the darkness beyond. Large to be a single vessel, too strange to be a natural formation. Its surface shimmered as though it was made of living metal, and its movement was silent, fluid, without any sign of engines or propulsion. The human ship didn't turn away. It accelerated toward the thing, weapon systems powering up invisible. Arcs of light. And then, in the span of a heartbeat, both vanished into the deep. The last signal from the human vessel was brief and chilling. You have 3 days. Prepare.